Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everyone. This is the second session in a series of 3 that I hope will support and assist you in your preparation for attendance, albeit virtually, at the NGO CSW66 forum from the 14th to 25th of March. During this session tonight, because it's 7 p.m. here in Northern Ireland, we are going to concentrate on the priority theme: achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programme. Advancing gender equality in the context of the climate crisis and disaster risk reduction is one of the greatest global challenges of the 21st century. But our aim this session is to give you a better understanding of the issues that impact women and girls and other vulnerable groups as a result of climate-related and other disasters. Today, women are increasingly being recognised as more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change than men, as women represent the majority of the world's poor, and they are more dependent on the natural resources that are threatened by climate change. At the same time, we must also recognise that women and girls are effective and powerful leaders and change makers for climate adaptation and migration. They are involved in sustainability initiatives around the world, and their participation and leadership results in more effective climate action. Continuing to examine the opportunities as well as the constraints to empower women and girls to have a voice and be equal players in decision-making related to climate change and sustainability is essential for sustainable development and greater gender equality. Without gender equality today, a sustainable future and an equal future remains beyond our reach. Today, we must call for enhanced collaboration and synergies to the implementation of the different frameworks in order to accelerate progress throughout the world. Soroptimist International holds general consultative status at the UN, and therefore we are able to submit written statements to the Commission and make oral interventions. If you were present at the first training session, you will have had the link to our statement. If not, I'm sure that it will be added to the chat of this session as well. In the statement, we have outlined some recommendations on actions that we believe must be taken by member states now in order to benefit women, girls, and the environment. This statement concludes with a call to action. Human action is changing the Earth's climate in unprecedented ways, but only human action can limit future climate change. Time has run out for governments across the world, and a lack of political will is no longer an excuse. States must act now to ensure the preservation of the planet and the realization of human rights for all women and girls. Please read the statement so that you're aware of SI's position and that you are able to advocate for it during the various events that you will attend during CSW66. As I pass over to Leigh, Ellwood Brown, SI Director of Advocacy, who will outline the objectives of this session, I would like to thank the SI Advocacy team for their hard work in putting together these 3 training sessions. It doesn't just happen. It takes time, resources, energy, and enthusiasm. So thank you, Advocacy team. And before I forget, our 3rd training session, which will concentrate on the review theme, will take place in a fortnight's time on Saturday, the 5th of March at 7 p.m. Then that's UK time. To you all, my best wishes for an informative session, and I look forward to the discussion that will follow. Over to you, Leigh.
Thank you very much, President Maureen, for those opening remarks. It is very, very crucial to have the human interaction, and I know the humans here on this session and other Soroptimists are just the right people for the job. I'd also like to introduce Ulla Madsen that will be helping me in this presentation. Ulla, would you like to say hello?
Yes, hello everyone, welcome.
Thank you. And I also have our other Chair of Policy, Bev. I'd just like to say hello and good morning to you.
Good morning, Leigh. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you. Thank you. And with Maureen, we are a hard-working team and we interact very regularly. at all sorts of hours of the day and night. Now, I'd like to share some housekeeping rules with you all. Questions and answers will be called for after each of the presentations. And if you wish to have further information on any of this detail, please email me on ida@seroptimistinternational.org. Please keep your microphones muted with the exception of the speaker. And can we see through a show of hands, if you're on your gallery, how many of those of you will be attending CSW this year for the first time? Okay, so that's quite good. So we have a number of new people. So the goals and objectives of this training session is for you to gain knowledge about the CSW66 priority theme, which is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. You will hear about some research and UN decisions on climate change through this session, some hands-on projects within disaster risk reduction, climate change litigation in the perspective of women's rights, policies and programs at the UN Environment Programme at UNEP Nairobi, Kenya. So I'd now like to call on Ulla to introduce our first speaker. Linda, please. Ulla, over to you.
Thank you so much, Leigh. Yes, Linda Witong. For more than 30 years, Linda has served as a Deputy District Attorney for the Maureen Country District Attorney's Office. After retirement, Linda is still very active for the district, and she is currently involved in cold case investigations for law enforcement agencies. She is a member of the Human Trafficking Task Force and a member of the California District Attorneys Association and California Homicide Investigators Association. Linda is also serving as SI Advocacy Advisor, in which position she has served several international presidents. Linda will speak about research she has made on UN decisions on climate change. Linda, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ulla, and thank you for that generous introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. How we started this research was, I was wondering what the UN had been doing over the decades regarding climate and the environment, and where women stood regarding these issues. Thousands of pages later, all of course that are completely annotated with citations, and are referred to lovingly as the SI Library. It's clear the issue of the environment and women's part in it has been going on for decades within the UN and the UN General Assembly. From the 1940s to the present day, the UN has focused on and often been challenged by environmental issues ranging from the depths of space to the depths of the ocean and everywhere in between. Women and girls, whether they were initially recognized or not, have been impacted throughout the decades by these challenges. At times, women were not even addressed during the discussion about the environment, in part because they were considered to be invisible, therefore they were not counted. They have gone from being not counted to initially being part of a vulnerable group to being heralded as being crucial as agents of change to solving the environmental problems and addressing the challenges of the climate crisis. How did the woman and environment's journey begin? I'm going to take you back to 1949. And the reason I'm going to take you back to 1949 is because many may not be familiar with how many of these issues were being raised even then, and women's part and recognition in that. In 1946, President Truman looked at the ravages of war on the environment, and he contacted the UN, and he basically said to them, we don't want to have any more wars over scarcity of resources. We want to be able to preserve and conserve our environment? Can you, UN, have a meeting which we can explore how to do this? And indeed they did. In 1949, in Lake Success in New York, over 700 participants were there, including women, who addressed issues on the environment dealing with the effects of minerals, forests, fuels, energy, water, land, fish, and wildlife resources. What's really interesting is in this conference, it was observed that, quote, a man who sees his house, which represents the dream of a lifetime, disappearing in smoke, knows he needs a fire engine. Now, similarly for us, the Charter's pledge of increased living standards may disappear. We realize the immediate and burning need for conservation. Does that sound somewhat similar to what's being said today? Many scientists also emphasize the importance of ecology to the living environment and living things. And they actually said, man, by destroying the balance of nature is increasing our resource depletion, but also people, man, humankind are the ones that can save us. They described women as being stewards of the environment. They described women as also being victims of what we would call nowadays social and climate justice. But they also described women participants as being part of a campaign who were necessary to solve these problems. They were trustees of what they described human knowledge in many fields, fundamental to a victory in such a campaign. The speakers talked of women being part of a pitifully small group who saw the utter clarity of the problem before us, which all other problems would fade away, the problem of our survival in this universe. And they saw a vision that would be untainted, as they described, by the follies of our species. And they said of men and women in the world that you see the new horizons of abundance, you have the intelligence to deal with it, you have the goodwill, you speak of a better world. And UN, it was proof that you were on the right track by bringing women along with men to participate in this conference. Grassroots was also mentioned here. Grassroots was mentioned by speakers as a tremendous movement in the direction of real conservation, where men and women who did not possess any particular technical or engineering competence spoke up courageously to halt the short-sighted policies of the present interests regarding conserving our environment. The importance of education was talked about here too. And how that came up was when one speaker said, you know, the possibilities of being converted from talk about conservation into the practice of conservation are going to be far more because of what gradually gets into the minds of women and men than it will be throughout the world what gets into statutes. What we learn will be much more powerful than any of the statutes that may be passed. This was all said in 1949. And if we had implemented and acted on everything that was said in 1949, I don't think I'd be here. I don't think we'd be having much of this conversation. But unfortunately, it was not the case. The 50s.
Linda, 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. What I am going to do is basically, at this point, I was going to talk about different topics like the global commons, which is the space, it's the atmosphere, it's the ocean, and it's, believe it or not, the Antarctica. I'm not going to have time because we're dealing with a massive piece of information here, but I will tell you what I think the trends are. I think the trends are that we have been talking about making the environment a better place for 75 years. We have been talking about including everyone when in fact, even now, not everyone is included. We are talking in terms of soaring rhetoric, which throughout the years, I can go in decades, what language has been from the start of the 50s to the present day. And we still do not have the political will. We still do not have the financial commitment to meet these challenges head on. That is what the trends have shown throughout the decades. I would be happy to talk to any of you about each decade and what I found in terms of language that can help you make your argument for each decade. I would also like, and I can enter it on the chat room, to give you a citation, E/CN.6/2022/3. That's the Secretary General's report, which basically lays out the rationale for how the zero draft, the first zero draft that's going to be presented eventually as an outcome document in CSW66 was created. He gives the rationale, and many of his recommendations are recommended in the first draft. I heartily recommend you to read that. And I also have that available in citations in case you want the cited verse where you can cite chapter and verse for what you're arguing. Ulla, I will bow out now, but again, our libraries and my research stands available for all of you to use. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Linda, thank you, Ulla. Linda, that is just absolutely amazing. We could have a whole session and program on your research. How amazing. It's not that we didn't know that since 1949, everyone's been talking about the environment, but you have raised so many issues. And I actually think it is time we did have this stronger stance, stronger wording. We have to now, we are impatient now. We have put up with it for too long to listen to some of those things that you've been talking about, the women being the steward of the environment. We've all known that, pardon me, but we've been like this silent majority and working like beavers behind the scenes. We actually need to now utilize your information and start speaking strongly and loudly and working with the decision makers to make change. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we please, any questions for Linda? No.
There is one,
Jutta?
Utah.
Yes,
Utah?
hi. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, Utah.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Could you please repeat that identifier to the speech? I couldn't shut it down quick enough.
The citation. The citation,
sorry, yes.
that I gave you, of course I would be, and actually I'll enter it on the chat. I'm afraid though if I do, then I may lose my place here. So
Okay.
Toward the end I'll do that. It's
Awesome.
E/CN.6/2022/3. As far as I'm concerned, the recommendations, when you see what the recommendations are at this point, you'll see the majority come from this report, and the rationale behind it is within this report. Now, there are things that are missing from that outcome document, but that would be the topic perhaps somebody else is going to be raising. But this is an excellent beginning for you. Excellent.
Fantastic. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Any other questions from the floor? Linda, I'd like to ask, I know you said it started from the interest in how long have we been saying these words, but what was the catalyst that started you on this research?
You know, what started me on the research was Seroptimist International, because we became very involved in the environment, as you know, within the last couple of years. And even before then, we were in our own way pioneers in everything from water to trying to conserve food and the like. And so I decided, well, what has the UN been saying about this? Why are we still talking about this in 2022? I didn't know that I was going to get involved in thousands of pages of documentation, but I'm so glad I did, because it will stand, at least with me, as a resource for anyone if you want to go back and justify why you're asking for it and why time is up. Believe me, we have a wealth of information now. And that's what I really wanted to provide. When I decided, as I was starting to look at this, that we've been at this, so, like you said, we're still at it, right?
Yes,
I said, I want to give you the ammunition, if you will, that when you're making an argument of time's up, which is what our statement was, a very strong statement, time's up, we have the firepower to back it up. in the research. And hopefully we can make a difference. We already have made a difference, but hopefully this can make a difference too.
And how long have you spent so far on this research?
I started in March, and I'm still doing summaries now, and I worked an average of 8 to 9 hours every day. There were very few days that I took off, only because I had several deadlines. Obviously I had the CSW in this deadline, but CSW had me on their drafting team. And so we started in the summer, determining what the issues were going to be and the research. So I had to get that for them. And then when they were doing their language, I had to get that organized for them. So basically it's been a labor of love, and it is a labor of love.
And now can you feed that back through to some of the decision makers at the UN?
We have. We've
have.
Circulated to some of the countries, to my knowledge. CSW circulated parts of it to their people that they've been talking to. And yes, I mean, that's why I'm here as well, is that if any of you want to make any of these points to your own governments or to your own groups, that's why we're here. We're here to help get the message out.
It's absolutely wonderful. We very much appreciate your work, and thank you. Are there any other questions for Linda? Okay, I think, Ulla, back over to you to introduce our second speaker, Kusum, please.
Yes, I will do that gladly. Next one is Kusum Athukorala. She holds a Master of Science in Managing Rural Change from Imperial College, University of London. She is a recipient of the International Water Association's International Women in Water Award and the Center Women of Achievement for Environment. She has held a series of responsible positions on national, regional, and international boards, and has contributed to establishing and growing array of national and international organizations. She has also worked as an advisor and consultant for water-related programs. Currently, her work in environmental-related advocacy covers a range of ground-level issues in Sri Lanka, such as gender and community development, water sanitation, hygiene, climate, and water security. Kusum is the chair of NetWater, Network of Women Water Professionals, and she is also a founding member of Women for Water Partnership and an assistant lecturer of the University of Muia. There might be some of you who recognize Kusum, as she was one of the speakers at the SI Convention in Kuala Lumpur 2019. Thank you, Kusum, for being here, because we know it's very late in Colombo, and Kusum have sent a speech in beforehand, so I will play that for you just now. Here we go.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Sir Optimist, and thank you very much, Ulla. The only person who would get me out of bed at 12 midnight, as it is now in Colombo. Well,
hello, good evening.
Go back to our theme, which is gender equality and empowerment of women in the context of climate change, and discuss the risk reduction policies and programs. Let me try and unpack this rather large, long theme. Gender equality and empowerment of women, to my mind, has to be taken as two different phases. If we do not work on empowerment of women, it is difficult for us to achieve gender equality. I think that especially in the context of effective action in disaster risk reduction, it is important to have that background of empowerment, especially for women in communities. When we talk of gender equality, we would like to take our collective minds back to these milestones, the 1985 Beijing Conference, the 1992 Dublin Rio Principles, which affirmed the importance of the role of women in water, the 2015 SDGs, and I think perhaps the Paris Agreement, which has been somewhat contentious in the way that we operationalize it. Now, all this point to one statement, which has come to my mind because it was a statement made by the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General. It is in the period of COVID that we should look at disaster risk reduction and related programs. How much of money are we getting for disaster risk reduction, capacity building, especially for women? Does it come to women's organizations? And this statement is, sorry, I'm going back to this statement, which I should have mentioned earlier. COVID-19 could reverse the limited gain in gender equality and women's rights made over decades. And it is being in the danger of being rolled back due to the pandemic. Now, are we talking again disaster, which is the pandemic? And in which case, what kind of preparation, what kind of capacity building, what kind of financial support have women's organizations received in the past in order to be effective in this disaster? Because COVID is a disaster for many of us, for poorer countries especially. It is already trying the women's capacity for endurance, which is sorely tried already. And it is making 60% of women around the world who work in the informal economy earn less, save less, and fall into deeper poverty. Some of them will never come out of it again. We talk of ensuring the well-being of half the world's population who are women. Do we believe in it? Do we believe in it actually? Or do we just say to be diplomatic at these high levels of, or I would say the stratospheric levels of discussion which go on in the seats of power? If we have a gender-blind approach to fiscal stimulus, supporting women in disaster risk reduction, strengthening and incapacitating them for disaster risk reduction, the devastation that women could face is going to continue well after the disaster or well after the pandemic. So, what is it that we need to support women in this risk reduction related to climate change? We do need technical support. We need the influence of social auditors who interact with community. We need advocacy and community engagement to be embedded into all the proposals, all the activities, all the projects related to disaster risk reduction. Risk reduction, capacity building starts bottoms up. So we need to put the money where there are communities asking for enhanced resilience. And when we look at global support for women, what do we need? We need professionals and community activists, both engaged in disaster risk reduction, having the same amount of training, the same access to training, as well as we need specific programs for women who are facing disaster risk reduction. Programs which are geared to their needs, to programs which are geared to their circumstances, and also programs which are supporting young people, because it is the disasters are going to be experienced mostly by young people. Dear Soroptimists, I think of this wonderful media coverage given to millionaires going into outer space. It is not so sexy to spend those same millions on sanitation, on sanitation after disasters, sanitation training for women before disasters. But there is a lot of money out there which is not going into disaster risk reduction or to development. The number of billionaires in the world has increased twofold after COVID. But what about the funding, the fiscal stimulus which comes into women especially? What about the funding which comes into disaster risk reduction community programs, the capacity building programs for the young, especially young women? So I think a crisis is a good time to start on change, to move out of our comfort zones, to plan a more inclusive, a more supportive, a more gender sensitive social contract, boosting the resilience of women, supporting them in times of disasters. Dear Soroptimists, don't get sad at this situation. Just get mad and go out there and shake those money trees which will give the women the support they need for disaster risk resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kusum. Some of those words, we're just repeating basically even what Linda was saying. We are the organization, I can tell you, to make change. We need 4 times the membership or more to what we have. We need more Soroptimists around the world. We're talking about dollars for risk reduction. We're talking about capacity building. We're talking about empowerment, technical support, the digital divide, advocacy, the young people. We're talking about young people training, the equity of training for male, female. We're talking about crisis and good time. This is such a take the opportunity for change. All the gender sensitive. We need gender responsive programs. We are hearing that from the UN and through everyday discussions in Soroptimists. It looks like programs just made for us. Thank you, Kusum, and congratulations and well done with your work. Thank you very much. Any questions for Kusum? First of all, before we start there, Marlene, my apologies, you had your hand up for Linda. If I can just take a break and get Marlene, you had a question for Linda. It didn't come up on my screen, sorry. Marlene, are you there?
Yes, here I am. Hi,
My apologies. Hello.
Well, it is not a question. I just wanted to confirm the importance of the library and all the research that Linda has done for the Soroptimists who have directly contact with their country, with their governmental representatives at the CSW. And last year, she was so very important because, you know, it was not an easy CSW. And all the countries were looking for language. And as Linda has such a large library, she could all the time help us with finding already existing language to use, so that not the conventional countries could say that it was not okay to go forward in language, that we all the time could say, no, this language was already used in another CSW. So Linda is really our backbone. Without her, we can't do it anymore. Really, the governments, they depend on her.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you, Linda. It is a very, very invaluable work. I do agree with you very, very much. It's wonderful to have. And all of your retirement hours are well and truly worthwhile, Linda. Thank you.
Well, Leigh, can I just say thank you once again to Kusum, because she is my dear colleague also in Women for Water Partnership Steering Committee, where she is doing a great job. So I was just wondering if there's someone later on that has questions, please put them in the chat, and we will send them to Kusum for answering. So Kusum, thank you so much for being up so late, and wish you all the best and sleep well, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ulla. Thank you
so
for
much.
inviting me. And I also have to say, I always like Soroptimist interaction, because I had a great time with Soroptimist in the World Water Forums in France, in Istanbul, and then in Kuala Lumpur. So it was nice seeing you all. I met some of you. All the best with your program. And we are always there in Women for Water to help and support. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us, Kusum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So any questions for Kusum? Anyone while she's here would like to ask anything further? Thank you. And write them in the chat and we can get back to you. We can pass them on to Kusum. Ulla, can we please introduce our third speaker?
Yes, for sure.
Barbara, thank you.
Barbara Pozzo, and warm welcome to you also. Barbara Pozzo has since 2001 been a full professor of comparative law at the Faculty of Law and also director of the Department of Law, Economics and Cultures of the University of Insubria in Como, Italy, where she teaches comparative legal systems, comparative law, and language and legal translation. Since 2002, Professor Pozzo has been the director of the PhD program in comparative law at the University of Milan, where she also served as director of the master program in environmental law. Professor Pozzo has received her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Milan and her PhD degree in comparative law from the University of Florence. During her professional life, Professor Pozzo has been invited as a speaker at various international conferences, among them many related to environmental law and climate change matters and gender equality. Barbara Pozzo is the editor of a series of publications and books, among others related to languages of the law and economics of the environment and climate change. Since 2011, Professor Pozzo has been a member of Forum of Legal Experts on Adaptation to Climate Changes, organized by LERU. It's a League of European Research Universities based in Malta, sustained by the European Commission. Since 2012, Barbara Pozzo has been a professor at LLM in Energy, Environmental and Climate Change Law, offered on a collaborative basis by the Faculty of Laws of the University of Malta and the Institute for Environmental and Energy Law of the University of Leuven, Belgium. Also very important, since 2019, Professor Pozzo has been the UNESCO Chair of Gender Equality and Women's Rights in a Multicultural Society. Last but not least, Professor Pozzo is also a optimist. So please, Professor Pozzo, please speak on the climate change litigation on the perspective of women's rights. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for this very, very generous presentation. I just wanted to comment, Mamma mia, how old I am. And well, anyway, I will share a presentation. I will try to introduce you to the topic of climate change litigation, which is a new trend in the last 2 decades as far as climate change is concerned. And on the other side, I would focus on some cases that are very important for women, in the sense that, in my opinion, these cases are very emblematic in terms of giving women a louder voice. So I hope you can see. Okay, can you see the slides properly?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Yes,
fine.
thank you.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, I would like to point out that climate change has been, of course, as we all know, at the core of various political and legislative initiatives at various levels: international, supranational, national level. And all these kind of initiatives not always take into consideration gender issues, as we all know already. In fact, although climate change affects everybody, it is not gender neutral, and on the contrary, it has significant social impacts and magnifies existing inequalities, such as disparity between women and men in their vulnerability and ability to cope with this global phenomenon. But on the other side, not all countries have adopted a specific legislation, and climate change litigation may be understood as an answer to the absence of regulation. What is climate change litigation? Well, activists, individuals, environmental associations, NGOs have used the judiciary in order to achieve more efforts in mitigating climate change when they were unsatisfied from the political arena. When from the political side, no satisfactory answer was arriving, activists have taken the weapons and went to court in order to achieve a result that was not they were not able to achieve at political level. What were they doing? They were summoning potential polluters, environmental agencies, or even states in court, asking judges this time, and not parliaments, to order the adoption of more stringent rules in order to cope with climate change. So this climate change litigation is not so much aimed at getting damages for the damages arising out of climate change, but much more as a mechanism to provide awareness raising, to introduce financial level to promote support for governmental policies, and to finally get the regulation that they were not able to get in at the beginning. So this phenomenon has its origin in the United States as an answer to the absence of regulation, but has recently spread out to Europe and to Asia in a way that might become very interesting as far as women empowerment is concerned. Why did climate change litigation spread out in Europe? As the European Union has always wanted to play an increasingly active role in pursuing a coherent environmental and energy policy. And since the 80s, European Union, European Commission in particular, has developed a very broad climate change regulation in all fields. But we are now in a phase where European citizens have, in a way, have realized that all this legislation that has been passed, it's not really effective. And they want to have more from the institutions. And that is why they are challenging the institutions, and in more recent time, even directly the polluters, in order to get from the judiciary more stringent rules. First big important case in Europe is the Urganda case, 2015, that was very, very famous and has influenced many other cases in other European jurisdictions. I don't want to go into details here, but what I can say is that it has been really fundamental case in changing the attitude of courts towards this issue of climate change. And recently, last year, the same Dutch courts that were ruling against the Dutch state in 2015 have ruled against Shell, ordering Shell to abate emissions in all their subsidiaries all around the world. So this is a very important trend. And what does this have to do with gender? Okay, Urganda case has been the inspirational case also for for a very important case, in my opinion, that is called Klimasenioringen against the Swiss federal government. Why is it important? Because this is the first European case where a group of women, only women, have launched the case for violation of fundamental rights. Seniorinnen rights, that we can translate with Senior Women for Climate Protection Switzerland, filed a legal request with the authorities arguing that older women are particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts, claiming that the Swiss authorities are failing to fulfill their duty to protect them as required by the Swiss Constitution, but also by the European Convention on Human Rights. Klimasenioringen rights had already applied in 2016 to various federal Swiss institutions like the Federal Council, the Federal Department of the Atmosphere, Transport and Energy, the Federal Office of the Atmosphere, the Federal Office of the Energy, and so on and so on and so on. To tie them, asking to tie them climate targets in order to enable the less than 2 degrees Celsius target set by the Paris Agreement to be reached, a target that, according to this association, was impossible to reach on the basis of the actual Swiss legislation in force. Not receiving a satisfactory answer by all these institutions, the case was brought by Klimasenioringen in front of Swiss courts, unfortunately unsuccessfully, but after the exhaustion of all domestic remedies, the association has introduced appeal in the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and the case is still pending. In my opinion, this case is very important because it does not only express the worry about climate change, but gives the courts the possibility to discuss gender issue and climate change issues together. And this kind of perspective is spreading all around the world. So we have the first Asian case that more or less repeats the same arguments than the one in Switzerland, with even much more emphasis on the problem of future generations. The case in Pakistan is called Maria Khan and others. It was a group of women against the Federation of Pakistan. This was a coalition of women that filed a constitutional petition on their behalf, but also on the behalf of future generations against the Federation of Pakistan, alleging that the federal government's inaction on climate change violated their fundamental rights, including the right to a clean and healthy environment and a climate capable of sustaining human life. A right that had been already recognized by precedent cases in front of the Pakistani court. The the coalition of women in Pakistan further argued that since climate change has a disproportionate impact on women, the government's climate inaction violated plaintiffs' rights to equal protection under the law and no discrimination on the basis of sex. So I think that this kind of argument is very important because it brings the equality argument in front of courts in combination with the problem of coping with climate change. So climate change litigation, especially in this Pakistani case, was able to make judges discuss on the ground of equality principle, on the ground of protection of women in this particular vulnerable situation, and it it has received much echo in the legal literature. So I think that these two cases give you the idea how much climate change litigation could be used in order to give a louder voice to women, not from top down, but in the bottom-up initiative, trying to express all the arguments that are connected with gender in particular terms. So I don't want to go too much in details of the Pakistani case. The Pakistani case is still pending. We do not have a result yet, but I think that the only already the fact that this case is pending is commented, it is in literature, it is in a way raising the awareness about the peculiarity of women's situation as far as climate change is concerned. So altogether, what I would like to say in conclusion is that of course it is very important to lobby in terms of top-down approach, because for example, I was at COP26 in Glasgow, and it was very important to see all these associations of women who were always present in order to make their voice be heard. But on the other side, I think that it is also important to sustain these groups of women who are acting from the other side, that is to say, bottom up, trying to invest courts and invest jurisprudence on this kind of this kind of matters. Altogether, what it is important is not that a rule exists, but the effectiveness of this rule. And these cases, I think, bring to the attention that women is exactly what they want. And in this perspective, I think that climate change litigation may lead to a more wider empowerment of women. And as we have seen, not only in Europe, not only in the US, but worldwide. Thank you very much. Grazie.
Barbara, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you. The effectiveness of that rule that may be able to empower women further around the world is wonderful to hear. But we have, you know, the number of things, the equalities that are coming out, the two cases in the Swiss case and the Pakistan, that both are women pushing for change. Our voice is coming through, so that really is amazing. Thank you. And the disproportionate impact on women to have all of this recorded, as you say, in literature in these cases will help us going forward. That is very, very effective indeed. We can all see how amazing and complex, how apt and timely this priority theme is, how complex it is as well. And as Bettina put in the chat, pioneers, women are pioneers in this area by the look of it. So let's support them and let's see the outcome of those cases. Will be very interesting to know. We almost need a follow-up with you as well to know what happens in those cases going forward.
And research, if I may add, research is going even further, because now I have a PhD student, a girl, just by chance, who is writing on these themes, and she's attending an interdisciplinary PhD on climate change and sustainability here in Italy. And we are working also with, I mean, as lawyers, we are working also with scientists in this PhD, and scientists are already presenting research on the so-called climate exposome, which is a new paradigm to study the impact of environment and climate change on health, and taking into consideration the impact on different individuals, that is to say, for example, women and men, children and adults, and so on, and elderly people, and so on. So I think that even scientific research will help us in advancing
And I think it's also a way of making our governments accountable for their decision making, which I think has been very lacking in many, many cases around the world. So that is just very, very good news to hear. Do we have questions for Barbara?
Yeah, Linda wants. Yeah.
Barbara,
Linda.
what a
Yes.
fantastic presentation. I'm curious what
Thank
you
you,
think.
Linda.
What you think the Human Rights Committee in October said that everyone has a right to a healthy environment. And the
Yes.
UN General Assembly has done, I think, 17 times now resolutions that say we're entitled to a right to a healthy environment. And the Convention on the Committee for the Rights of a Child is working on recommendations for the states for the right of children having a healthy environment.
Yes.
What part are the legal team, your legal team, playing in that? And I'm sure you're playing a part.
Well, actually, no. What I am doing right now is to help drafting the Italian law on climate change, and because we do not have it. And and part of my research is exactly on these issues. That is to say, how to draft, the future of national legislation in this context, because we have seen beautiful statutes coming out that then remain, law in the books and do not become law in action. So we do not, women are generally very practical and they want to see something which is instead in action. So, but your point was very, very important in the sense that these kind of initiatives at international level have led, for example, just to give you a small example, we had, after I think decades of discussion, last week, 2 or 10 days ago, the constitutional reform approved in Italy. And finally, we have the protection of the environment in our constitution with regard also to future generation. So these are not only words, because words that are spoken by the UN are then, of course, heard also at national level. And a discussion that was, very, very long-lasting without an output finally came to an end. And we have, after years and years and years, the constitutional protection of the environment, even in Italy, and even with regard to future generation, which was until very recently very, very, very difficult to reach.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Linda. Further questions for Barbara? I can't see any hands. Ulla, can you, Bev?
No.
No. Thank you very, very much, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you to you. It was nice being with you.
Yes, good luck with all of your studies and research. We look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ulla, would you please introduce Mary?
I rush to the next one, but not least, Mary Mourou has a Bachelor of Science degree in both sociology and psychology from the University in Nairobi. Mary is the founder director of WIMA CBO, whose purpose is to improve the living conditions and the rights of the most vulnerable and marginalized children. Mary is a member of Evolution Business Council, executive board member of NGO Committee on Sustainable Development in New York. She is the Optimist International UN representative at the center in Nairobi and a board member of Optimist International. Dear Mary will speak about policies and programs at the UN Environment Program, UNEP. Please, Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, our moderator. Thank you very much, Ulla, for that very elaborate introduction. I'm calling in from Nairobi, and a very warm good evening from Nairobi. We are 3 of us in Nairobi, and we follow up on women and climate change and gender and environment. on behalf of SI here in Nairobi, and our work is really to chase and see how does environment policies and the program at the UNEP affect the work that Soroptimist International does. So we do have a follow-up on different topics that include women in rural areas, in terms of water and sanitation, disaster risk and management. And we also do follow up on UNESCO in terms of education, because the United Nations Environment Program in Nairobi has a big scope. So it's not just climate change alone, but we do education, and we also do other matters to do with wash and sanitation. I think since the UNEP program was incepted in 1972, there has been a lot of progress and on what civil society organizations like SI can do, and the agenda that has been set by the member states who are accredited to UNEP can also be able to provide directions in matters to do with climate change. Our work really entails in looking into exactly how does the policies that are incepted by the member states affect women and girls, or affect the lives of women in every aspect. And here we are able to caucus with like-minded organizations to be able to bring to life on what we can intervene and be able to bring change or impact to alleviate the effects of climate change that has been really articulated well by the previous speakers of how climate change crises can affect women and girls in all their aspects. So our work is really complex, and we are one of the very many global major group organizations that team up with other stakeholders to address environmental challenges globally. If you look into the structure and the way the program works, there is a committee of permanent representatives from the member states that are accredited, and these member states are able to have a formal way of working that is established in subsidiary organ that is governed by the council, now that is these days called the United Nations Environment, or rather the UNEA. And since 1995, the UNEA has been meeting every other year or every other alternate years, and it discusses on the priorities and the global policies that will set the precedents and the work that governments, civil society, and other organizations will be able to work on in matters to do with the environment and climate change. So in terms of our work, we follow up discussions on the committee of the permanent representatives. Sometimes it is called the open CPR process. That is normally it comes just before the UNEA. And we have had 4 UNEAs already, or rather the 4 environment assemblies that have happened in the past. And currently we are experiencing the 5th UNEA environment session that is discussing the priority of climate change. The current chair of the UNEA 5 is from Portugal, while the vice chair is from Algeria. The vice chair is the vice chair of there are 2 vice chairs from Algeria and Mexico, and we also have another chair from Estonia. Currently, the rapporteur of the UNEA, the 5th session, is from Pakistan, and we do have different subcommittees that have been convening to discuss different topics. So each one of us.
Mary, I apologize to interrupt you, but do you want to show your presentation also?
Oh, my net is so low, Ulla. Let me just.
No, should I do it for you? Do you want it?
Yes,
kindly, please.
Ulla.
Yeah, kindly. My net is very low.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. I hope you are on the third slide. Third slide, where I was just concluding that since inception in the 1972 of the UNEP program, SI has been consistent in following up on the issues to do with the environment. And I talked about the way we caucus with the major groups, particularly the women major group on environment, to follow up on matters that affect women and girls in matters of climate change. On my fourth slide, which is about the committee of the permanent representatives, I think I had just quickly said that we do have all the accredited governments currently that are accredited by UNEP, and these are the governments that really, member states that really set the pace of what is the priority, what is the issue, and how are governments responding to climate crisis, to environment, and what is going to be done by programs that have been given the first priority. Our work now as the UN representatives in Nairobi, we do follow up and make sure that the laws and the laws and of course the policies that they come up with are in favor of women and girls that are affected very adversely by matters to do with environment and climate action. I also, I think, said that the governing organ was established in the year 1985, and really this is what now has translated from UNEP to currently what we referred to as UNEA, or the United Environment Program Assembly. And I said that we are currently on the 5th session of the United Environment Program session that is happening. I don't want to repeat about who is the chair and who is the vice chair, but it is important that when we know the countries that are chairing or are vice chairs as the advocates that we are at the Global Voice for Women and Girls, we can team up with them and we can influence their topics and also their decisions and how they will make policies that will affect women and girls. On the next slide, Ulla, I have just showed a sample of how the women major group members that we here in Nairobi are members of, and we participate very actively. When we get an opportunity to be in the assembly and in the negotiation chambers, we really are representing women voices in the major stakeholders forum to actually influence the decisions that our governments and our member states are legislating on matters to do with the environment. Just to note, we do have 9 major group stakeholders and other forums that have the accredited UNEP organizations that really make their case known or really defend the positions that affect environment globally. I also see that as Soroptimist International, we do have an opportunity to raise the voice of young women Soroptimists. That is really a key voice for us. Children and youth is a recognized major group in the UNEP. And if we could have young women Soroptimists becoming members of that group, we will also not just talk about women, but we shall be able to represent young women, adolescent youth, and also vulnerable groups that form a good group of women that we are a global voice for. So it is so important that anything that we look into, we have got to use the lenses of not just women, but also young Soroptimists, because they are affected by matters to do with climate challenges and climate change.
Mary, you have to wrap up. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I am actually wrapping up and saying that we do have slides that can show where we are on the current UNEA 5.2 program. the theme is strengthening actions for nature and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are already in the in-person UNEA Part 2 program, or rather the conference that is going to happen on the February 28th up to the 4th of March. And over and above that, we will also have the celebration of UNEP at 50, because United Nations Environment Program has turned 50 years, and the celebrations shall be happening on the 3rd and the 4th of March. And the devoted commemoration will still address the same theme that has been addressed in UNEA. So all in all, Ulla, we do have an opportunity to speak up and to make a difference in the planet crises that we know that people, planet, and prosperity is where we can intervene as Soroptimists. Everyone can have an opportunity to intervene in climate change. And by speaking up about challenges that are facing us, we can all make a change. Kindly speak up in your clubs, in your federation, because I just spoke up, and you can do the same. Ulla, thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation. Over and back to you.
Welcome, dear Mary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ulla. Thank you, Mary. I know you're doing wonderful work, and it's becoming quite a busy centre at Nairobi, our UN centre there, and we're very well represented. Some of the things you're talking about, our young women, we need the young women to come in through Soroptimist. We can provide that global voice for them through so many avenues, just like what you're saying. So the major stakeholders that you're working with, I know you're doing amazing work there with them and very active. The people, climate and prosperity, to speak up. They're all the things that we have to do around the world. So I thank you very, very much for your presentation. Are there questions for Mary?
Yes.
Yes, Sharon?
Greetings. Thank you. Great presentations. Just a question. If we are from a particular country, because we're in over 120 countries, what is the best way you can recommend to know what the position of your own government is, so that you are informed when you're going to try and advocate on behalf of the issue? Thank you.
I would say that we have to know what the Soroptimist stand is. We have position statements. We have amazing research that you've just heard, and libraries that are available to know the overall situation. But then we also must know the stance for our government, and to be able to lobby and advocate there as well, and maybe even influence them through some of their negotiations, particularly in the regional committees that are, a lot of them are now over in actual fact. But as the regional meetings, is that what you were saying, Sharon? Sorry.
That's the beginning of it, and the end was my question is, how do you know? I'm from Canada. How would I know? And I already know the answer, but how do I know what Canada's position are? Are they the good guys or the bad guys? Or are they in between? Do they need convincing? What is their position that they're advocating for at CSW versus say Italy or the United States or whatever? Because when we talk to our member states, we need to know what their position is. I mean, Mary, you might, because you're in the room a lot, you might know, or Linda might know the answers.
The country statement would be a good one to start with, but please,
can
Barbara?
Intervene?
Yes.
I will put in the chat the website of Grantham Center on the different climate change laws in the world. So there you can have an idea of which are the laws enacted in different regions and states on climate change. And then there is, if you want to know, I don't know if this is also the question, there is another database of Sabin Center at Columbia University that classify all climate change litigation of the world. I can put this also online.
Thank you, Barbara. Does that answer, Sharon? Does that help?
I just wanted everybody to know that not every country is going into CSW with the same position. So who needs a little bit of help?
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Thank you. Very good question.
Leigh, Beth first, and then Barbara. I don't know if your hand is up or down now. Barbara.
No, my hand is down. My hand is down. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's
so
okay.
Beth,
Bev?
and then Linda.
Thank
yes,
you.
I wonder, Mary, if you could tell us the general themes of UNEA 5, please.
Did you hear that, Mary?
What are the themes that you're working on in UNEA 5? Or the topics?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bev. There are 5 clusters and 5 major topics that are already happening at UNEA 5. And I could quickly say that here in Nairobi, we are following up on the 3rd cluster topics that are generally on nature, women, and food security for rural women. And that is a topic that 2 of us are really following up on. I know I do have Beatrice Ellwood, the other center representative with me on the call. And also Asha is following up a lot on matters to do with pollution. So we do have, we are 3 of us, and we are following up on 3 topics that really will tell us more about what does it have to take with in terms of nature. And I would say that for the 5 clusters, there is a total of 18 resolutions, and we are looking keenly on how these resolutions are going to be negotiated. And just to tell you that what is happening in the last 1 week, when we attended the major group and stakeholders forum discussions and briefings, we know that, for example, Russia and China are not very friendly and are not very focused in all-inclusive negotiation where the civil society are in the house. So we are looking into friendly nations and friendly major member states to really change that environment so that we can participate more with our written interventions and also our oral interventions. So Bev, it's a really complex question, but I tell you, our focus is on the 3rd cluster, nature, women in terms of food security, and also rural women in terms of climate change.
Thank you, Mary. That's I wanted to bring that out because that intersects not only with the Commission on the Status of Women, but it also intersects with the work that we do in FAO in Rome, and also with the Population Development Commission that's coming up as well, which is based on the same issue. So it is a cross-cutting issue and a very important one for all women. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Bev. Linda, did you have your hand up?
Well, yeah, I wanted to add to all the excellent recommendations of how to find what a country stands for regarding climate. I think it depends on the issue. And if you really want to go into the weeds research-wise, what you need to do is look and see what reservations, otherwise known as objections, they may have made to that issue, and not the risk of being cynical. Even if they okay the issue and they say, oh yes, we're for it, you have to look to see whether that country has implemented it, and if so, how. And some of the best sources are what I call shadow reports from NGOs in that country.
Thank you, Linda. Do we have any other questions?
Well, we are really far behind with the time. Okay. So, Leigh, have you seen that half an hour? Hope everyone will forgive us.
Yes, but it was an 1.5-hour session. Yeah. So we want to thank every one of you for joining us this morning and giving examples and details on the complexity of our priority theme for CSW66. It will hopefully give everyone in membership and each of you on the panel today or in the gallery to be able to go back to your clubs and start doing some work towards this area in our own government areas for a start. To explore the importance of our integrated gender responsive approaches, which has come out throughout most of those sessions. The resilience of women, we have to build the resilience of women, which has also come out throughout a lot of those areas. We have to protect our human rights and the right for a healthy environment of all women and girls in their diversity. Our voice and our urgency for the human rights, to bring human rights for women, is very, very important for each and every one of us to do our role. So we have to, this transition that we're in, where we're 50% of the world population, so we can't be quiet anymore. We have to raise that voice loud and clear, and to do that through younger people. We have to bring our younger members through and give them shadow forums, start to give them opportunities to go through. You've heard this morning how a number of areas are calling for young people. So young soroptimists, there's lots of avenues to start feeding young soroptimists through these areas to help with the UN, the decision makers, our governments. So I want to thank you very much for giving up your time on a Saturday evening or Saturday or Sunday morning, such as we have. But thank you for joining us. And our next training session, as Maureen said, is our third out of the 3 series. And it'll be on Saturday, March the 5th, and the same time, UK time, 7 p.m. It'll be on the review theme, and the lead will be Bev this time, Bev Buka, and women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work. Agree conclusions of the 61st session. And we have to register in advance. So please go onto the SI website and register for that session. We look forward to seeing many of you on that 3rd session. Thank you.
Can I just add thank you to the speakers once again, to Linda and to Barbara and to Mary and Kusum, of course, she's leading in Colombo. So thank you so very much for attending tonight.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
I support that too.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Wonderful
Bye-bye.
speakers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye. Bye.
See you next time.
Yes, thank you, Stefania. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.